Someday I'll repay you, please. Annie Brooks never took her eyes off Thomas. I mean it. I don't know when, and I don't know how I'll ever manage it, but if you help me today, someday I will repay you. My mother needs treatment, and I don't have enough for the deposit. Thomas's expression tightened, not with anger, but with caution. Repay me, he asked. Do you have any idea how many people have said that to me? They promise they'll write. They promise they'll come back. They tell me I changed their lives and then they disappear. No letter, no phone call, nothing. Annie shook her head quickly. I won't do that. Or perhaps, Thomas said, lowering his voice. People know exactly what to say when they need money. The words settled between them, cold and heavy. Annie looked down at the crumpled plastic bag in her hands. Then, with trembling fingers, she opened it. I'm not saying those things just to get money from you, she said. I swear this is everything I have left. Every last dollar. I sat in the bathroom and counted it 3 times because I kept hoping I had made a mistake. She pulled out a small stack of worn bills and pressed them tightly into her palm. This isn't even close to what they're asking for. I know it isn't enough, but my mother is upstairs and I honestly don't know what else I can do, Miss Brooks. A woman's voice came from behind her. Annie turned. At the financial assistant's desk, Mrs. Alvarez was holding Grace Brooks's paperwork in one hand. Behind Annie, the line had grown longer, and several people were beginning to look impatient. I need an answer from you, Mrs. Alvarez said. Are you able to pay the deposit or not? If the required amount is not paid or financial assistance is not approved, your mother cannot be transferred to the surgical unit for the operation scheduled this evening. Annie hurried back to the desk, still clutching the plastic bag. Please, can't you just let my mother go in first? She pleaded. Let the doctors begin treatment and I'll find a way to cover the rest. I'll call more people. I'll borrow money. I'll sign anything you need me to sign. Mrs. Alvarez shook her head gently. Your mother has been examined and is currently stable. Dr. Parker is ready to admit her according to the treatment plan, but I do not have the authority to authorize admission without the deposit or approved financial assistance. But my mother has cancer. I understand. Then tell me, Annie said, her voice breaking. How does making her wait help her? Mrs. Alvarez looked down at the computer screen and slowly read from the account summary. The initial deposit required for admission and the scheduled surgery is $12,800. The payments you have already made together with confirmed assistance. Total $7,340. The remaining balance due tonight is $5,460. Annie stood frozen. Mrs. Alvarez lowered the paperwork. Her expression softened slightly, though her voice remained professional. I have to ask you one last time, Miss Brooks. Do you have the remaining $5,460? Annie's fingers tightened around the bag until the plastic crackled in her hands. No, she said, her voice nearly breaking apart. I only have $216 left. That's all. I sold our car. I pawned my mother's ring. I used all the money I had saved for school. I borrowed from people who barely have anything themselves. I don't have another $5,000. Then could you step aside and let the rest of us take care of our business? The man's voice came from the seats behind her. Annie turned. A broad-shouldered man in a work jacket stood there with his wallet already open in his hand, his mouth pulled tight with irritation. The woman beside him turned her face away, visibly embarrassed by him, but he kept going. No one asked you to tell your whole life story, he said. Everyone in here has problems. Telling us how terrible yours are isn't going to make money appear. Annie's face flushed. My mother is waiting for treatment and standing here talking about your car and your mother's ring isn't treating her. The man replied, if you have the money, pay it. If you don't, stop blocking the desk. Nobody here can help you. No one in line said a word. No one stepped forward. The hospital lobby continued moving around them as though Annie's despair were nothing more than a small sound lost in the machinery of an ordinary day. Elevator bells chimed. Carts rolled across the polished floor. A child coughed into his father's shoulder. Near the entrance, a volunteer pushed an elderly woman in a wheelchair toward the exit. Annie pressed the plastic bag against her chest and stepped away from the desk. Her breathing became quick and shallow. For a brief moment, she looked toward the elevators as though she could simply go upstairs, sit beside her mother, and pretend she had not failed her. Then she turned back to Thomas. "Mr. Whitmore, please." Her voice grew smaller until it was little more than a plea. "I know this has nothing to do with you. I know you don't owe me or my mother anything, but you help patients. I've seen your name on the fundraising programs here at the hospital. I've seen you on television talking about people the system has left behind." Thomas said nothing. Annie took one step closer. "You don't have to trust me. Don't give me a single dollar. You can pay the hospital directly. You can ask the doctor. Ask the financial department. My mother's name is Grace Brooks. She is upstairs waiting to be admitted for treatment, and the only thing stopping her is money I cannot find." Daniel, the assistant standing beside Thomas, leaned slightly toward him. "Our foundation has its own review process," he said quietly. "We can arrange for someone to look into this case tomorrow." Annie immediately turned toward Daniel. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'm begging for tonight. I'm asking you to help tonight because tonight my mother is still here. I cannot go upstairs and sit beside her bed, pretending I did everything I could while I let you walk out that door without even asking for your help." Thomas looked down at the small stack of money in her hand. A $5 bill had been folded into quarters, one corner stained with age. Beside it was a pawn shop receipt and a hospital cost estimate with the name Grace Brooks printed at the top of the page. "Did you say your mother's name is Grace Brooks?" Thomas asked. "Yes, Grace Brooks." Annie nodded repeatedly. "Dr. Evelyn Parker is treating her. Please call the doctor. I'll wait right here." Thomas turned to Mrs. Alvarez. "Can drive." Parker confirmed the patient's treatment plan. Mrs. Alvarez immediately straightened, only now recognizing the man standing before her. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore. I can ask her to come down." "Please do." Annie looked at Thomas, hardly daring to blink. Does that mean you might help my mother?" Thomas did not look at her. "It means I want to hear the truth." Annie's lips trembled. She nodded. It was not a yes, but it was not a no either. And at that moment, it was enough for her to hold on to. A few minutes later, a woman in a white coat hurried toward the desk. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm Drive, Evelyn Parker." Thomas shook her hand. "Grace Brooks. Does she truly need immediate treatment?" "Doctor." Parker glanced briefly at Annie before answering. "Yes, her condition is stable at the moment, but her illness is serious and she needs timely surgery. I would not recommend delaying it any further, and the reason the surgery cannot proceed is the outstanding deposit." At this time, yes. Thomas was silent for several seconds. Then he turned toward the financial desk. "Mrs. Alvarez, please prepare the payment authorization forms. The Whitmore Care Foundation will cover the entire remaining balance. $5,460. Annie did not move for one moment. She seemed to forget how to breathe. Mrs. Alvarez immediately placed her hands on the keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." Thomas took a black fountain pen from the inside pocket of his coat and bent over to sign the document Mrs. Alvarez placed in front of him. Annie lifted a hand to cover her mouth. Tears spilled from her eyes at once. "You're really going to help my mother?" "I'm going to pay the remaining medical balance." Thomas said. "Your mother needs you upstairs beside her, not down here apologizing because you cannot afford her cancer treatment." Tears streamed down Annie's face. "Someday I will repay you," she said again. "I mean it. I will find a way." Thomas capped his pen and looked at her tear-streaked face. "Then remember how this feels," he said. "And when you meet someone else standing at the end of the road the way you are today, do not turn your back on them." Mrs. Alvarez picked up the phone. "Patient admissions. I have confirmed payment for Grace Brooks. She can be transferred upstairs for surgical preparation." Annie clutched the plastic bag against her chest and began backing toward the elevators. After a few steps, she stopped and turned to look at Thomas. "Mr. Whitmore." "Yes, my name is Annie." Thomas gave a small nod. "Go be with your mother, Annie." The elevator doors opened. Annie stepped inside, tears still falling, her last $216 still clenched tightly in her hand. As the doors slowly closed, Thomas stood there watching her disappear toward the upper floors of the hospital. He believed he had just paid the surgical deposit for the mother of a stranger. The elevator moved so slowly that Annie wanted to pound on the buttons, as though striking them hard enough could force it to climb faster. She stood alone in the corner. "Sorry. I'm so sorry. I need to get to her." Whoa. Steadily without letting a sob escape. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, Annie rushed out so quickly that she nearly collided with a hospital employee pushing an empty wheelchair. "Sorry," she murmured, already hurrying past him. 18 was halfway down the hall. Her mother was still lying exactly where Annie had left her, propped up against 2 pillows, a blue blanket neatly drawn over her thin legs. Before coming to the hospital, Grace had carefully wrapped a scarf around her thinning hair, as though a clean scarf could somehow hide how deeply weeks of illness had worn her down. Her Bible lay open beside a cup of water. Though Annie knew her mother a single line, Grace always opened it whenever the hospital is getting ready to take her mother into surgery. "The deposit has been paid." My daughter's tear-streaked face. "The paperwork is already starting." To the bag. Annie was still holding tightly against her chest. "You've been crying." Annie closed the door behind her. "Mom, they're getting ready to take you into surgery." Grace stared at her. "How?" "They're already starting work. Dr. Parker will explain everything, but the deposit has been paid." "This is all I could." Grace said nothing. "I'm sorry, Mom." Her hand slowly on the edge of the blanket. "How did you?" Stranger intervened. Annie set the bag on the chair. "I didn't. There was a man downstairs in the lobby. Annie. Thomas Whitmore, the donor. His name is on the plaques." "Thomas Whitmore. I went to him for help on all that. He was right there by the financial services desk. I begged him to help save you. I didn't care about my stranger, and you really went up to a stranger and asked him to pay my hospital bill." Grace lowered her eyes. Shame a few. Didn't know what else to do before relief had even had the chance to reach it. "Oh, sweetheart, you should never have had to do that." Annie moved closer to the bed. If I had to do something worse than beg a stranger if I had to do something worse than beg a stranger just to keep you alive and treated, I would have done it." Night had completely fallen. All that remained in the glass was her own reflection. A woman lying helplessly in a hospital bed, thinned by weeks of fighting illness, with her daughter standing behind her, empty-handed. How much did he pay? The remaining balance was $5,460. He said his foundation would review the rest of the treatment costs tomorrow morning. The remaining balance is $5,460. His foundation will review the rest in the morning. That much money from a man who does not even know who I am. He knows your name now. That is not the same thing. No, Annie said soft. Knowing a patient's name is not the same as truly knowing them. Yet once the older man understood, he understood what was. He stopped making her beg. He did not make me beg. Once he understood, Grace turned sharply toward her. Once he understood, Annie fell silent. She did not want her mother imagining what had happened in the hospital lobby, the cold stars, the suspicious questions, or the man in line who had told her not to burden strangers with the story of her. The older benefactor wanted to know whether she was telling the truth. Mary said that was all. Grace studied her daughter for a long moment. She knew Annie too well. "Did anyone treat you badly downstairs?" Annie looked down and ran her fingers along the torn edge of the plastic bag. "It's all right, Mom. It is all right. Whatever anyone said does not matter as much as you getting treatment." Grace looked at her in silence. Then slowly, whatever anyone said is less important than her mother finally receiving treatment. Was dry and cool. "You should not have had to handle all of this alone down there." Annie struggled to swallow the ache in her throat. "If I didn't do it, who else was going to?" Annie should not have had to handle everything alone down here. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Who else would have died? Dr. Evelyn Parker stepped inside with a nurse carrying "Hello, Annie. I'm Drive Parker. We need to get you admitted. Here is your identification bracelet." Parker had removed her white coat and folded it over one arm. "The next few hours are critical, but we are doing everything we can to ensure her comfort and stability." Dr. Parker said, "Authorization has been received to move forward with surgical admission and preparation tonight. I would like to begin preparing you tonight and proceed with the operation. As soon as the surgery is surgery." Truly what I should do. At Annie for a moment before turning to the doctor. "What I should do?" "Grace, you are stable for the moment, but we should not delay." "Stable at the moment, but we should not delay any longer than necessary." Grace took a slow breath. "Then I suppose we should move forward." The nurse stepped closer and gently fastened the identification bracelet around Grace's wrist. "We should have a room ready for you upstairs. The private room upstairs is ready. You'll be able to go with her right after the transfer. Your daughter may accompany you." Grace managed a faint smile. Weak but still familiar warmth. She would follow me even if you took me all the way up to the roof. The nurse smiled back. This form outlines the risks and benefits of the procedure. Please review sections 3 and 4 carefully. And he quietly slipped into the hallway some water. She had taken only a few steps when she heard voices. That's the girl I was telling you about, station. The one who bothered the donor downstairs. The woman said. Not she directly asked for the money. You know, the girl who went up to and the donor paid her mother's deposit. Another voice answered. I heard she flat out asked him for money. She knew exactly who to ask. Your mother's deposit right there. Straight to the foundation. Plenty of people in this building. They always know the loopholes. She probably knew exactly who to ask. Annie stopped beside the vending machines. Her back turned toward the voices. Her cheeks burned as though someone had stolen. She didn't do anything wrong to turn around and tell them she had sold the only. I can't believe she wasted her tuition money like that. That she had pawned her mother's ring. I don't know why she can't just wait her turn, the savings she had once put aside for school. Honestly, some people expect special treatment around here. She had spent every last. I can't believe she's wearing that here. She wanted to ask and trembling like that. What did she do? Mother kept waiting simply so no one could accuse her of receiving compassion. She finally left the room, but Annie did not turn around. She fed 4 quarters in. I wonder if she even changed her clothes from yesterday and quietly started back. The final figures for the endowment are all here, sir. Much appreciated, Thomas, and I will look this over on the way back. While a hospital administrator handed him a folder, he looked as though he was preparing to leave. How is your mother? She's stable. She should approach him again before she could decide. Thomas noticed. My mother is prepared for transfer upstairs. You're getting ready to transfer upstairs. Good. Annie tightened her grip around the bottle of water. People are saying I knew how to get what I wanted. People are saying I knew how to get what I wanted. Station then returned to her face. Did you get what you wanted? Did you get what you wanted? My mother is going into surgery. Then let them. My mother is going into surgery. Doesn't it bother us hearing them say those things? Does the gossip bother you? People are generous with their opinions when someone else. People are generous with opinions when someone else must bear the consequences. Your mother is about to undergo surgery. Your mother is about to undergo surgery. That matters. Annie nodded. You must save your strength for something that matters. Faded. Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. What I said downstairs. I know what I said downstairs like empty words, but it wasn't. You did. I promise you I will find a way to pay you back for this. Closer. It is. I know you believe your promise, but it is more than belief. You may have nothing right now. After today, you may never see me again. I have nothing now and may never see you again after today. But someday, if you ever need help. Daniel looked away slightly, perhaps not wanting to embarrass her for speaking with such complete sincerity. But this time, Thomas did not smile. He took a business card from the folder. I don't know what I would have done without you. And wrote something on the back. Then he handed it to Annie. The front bore the name of the Whitmore Care Foundation. On the back, he had written only one sentence. Tonight, stay beside your mother. That is enough. Annie accepted the card carefully. Annie, it was something fragile enough to break. They said they were moving me. It's okay, Mom. I'm right here. Everything is going to be fine. Go. When Annie returned to the room, I'm sorry. I just quickly ran out to get. We're already preparing to move Grace's bed across the way. The moment her mother saw her, she immediately reached out her hand. Where did you go? I went to get you some water. Grace noticed the business card in Annie's other hand, but she did not ask about it. She simply shifted her hand slightly, making room for Annie's fingers to slip between her own. As the bed was rolled into the hallway, Annie walked close beside her mother, matching her steps to the slow turning of the wheels. The whispers behind her gradually faded away. The unpaid balance had disappeared from the hospital account. But the fear was still there. Annie, listen to me. Was a surgery. No matter what happens in there, I want you to be strong. When they reached the elevator, you are ready for this. Rack raised her daughter's hand. Whatever happens, you must never let this night make you ashamed that you asked for help. Stared at the closed elevator doors in front of her. Don't you dare feel shame for someone else's mistakes. Annie, I'm not ashamed. Mom, you hold on to that card and you walk out of here with your head high. Annie realizes I'm really not ashamed, Mom. Fanny and Grace's story touched your heart. Please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories about kindness, courage, and hope. By the next, Annie had learned that hospitals so much as change voices. Night nurses lowered their conversation. Patient 302 needs the CT scan prior. I'll make sure transport is ready by 8. What about the discharge for did not know? Machines continued their steady beeping through all of it. Grace had spent the night on the surgical floor. Annie sat beside her bed in the same clothes. Thomas Whitmore's card tucked into the inner pocket of her coat. Once near dawn, Grace had woken. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Annie read a psalm with He makes me lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. We've reviewed the latest scans and it looks like we should proceed with the surgery as soon as possible. With a surgeon named Drive. Hanley explaining the operation. As we discussed, the procedure carries standard risk, but it's the recommended course in the way we use a minimally invasive approach. The affected portion of the colon will be removed and nearby tissue examined. Dr. Hanley said once pathology gives us more information, the pathology results will determine the next step about what comes next. How soon can I return to work? And how long before I can go back to work? Doctor. Waking up and following instructions matters more than work right now. Mrs. Brooks. Today I would settle for you waking up and following instructions. Did you get something to eat this morning, baby? Grace gave a small smile. You're about to have surgery and you're asking about my breakfast. Did you eat? I just don't understand why they can't bring me toast before the surgery. Surgery and you're worried about breakfast. All right, we're ready to take you upstairs now, Mrs. Johnson. Transport aide entered with another nurse. The room changed at once. Forms were checked. The rails of the bed came up. Grace's Bible was moved onto the side. Sweet girl, I'm right here. Annie stood suddenly unable to find anything useful to do with her hands. Grace reached for her. Come here. Annie bent close. Whatever you do, don't let her mother's arms were weaker than they had ever felt. You always remember that. But she still pulled Annie. Whatever happens in surgery, you did not fail me. Grace whispered. Mom, whatever happened, don't say that. You did not fail me. But you're coming back, right? You have to. I know you worked so hard last night holding everything together. You did so well, baby. I bet you spent the whole night. A child should not have had to carry so much for her mama. A child should not have had to do that for her mama. Annie shook her head. I'm not a child. Grace looked at her for a long second. Not after last night. The nurses began rolling the bed toward the door. Annie walked alongside it until they reached the restricted doors leading to surgery. There, she had to stop. I love you, Grace said. I love you, too. Bye, my love. Fix your coat before you catch pneumonia in this place. I love you, too. Broken laugh. Yes, ma'am. Don't forget to button up that coat. All right. Grace disappeared behind them. It's too cold in here to be walking around like that, suggested the waiting room. It was nearly empty. He's in good hands. With chairs upholstered. Let's go to the waiting room. It's just around the corner. A muted television showed morning traffic reports. Snow had traffic as heavy on the I-5 heading south this morning with delays expected near the city center. Annie's entire life had gone through a pair of doors 10 feet away due to the heavy snowfall. Commuters should expect significant delays. Buses are running behind schedule. Still holding the $216 she had been unable to turn into enough. Thomas's card was now tucked between the Bible pages beside the payment receipt. Mrs. Al before the transfer at 9:15, a volunteer offered coffee. I'm so very sorry. We did everything we could. A man across the room stood when a surgeon approached then folded. Do not be anxious about anything. Heard whatever news had come for his family. Do not be anxious about anything. Tried to read the same line of scripture 4 times and finally closed the book. Aliyah Williams. She looked up too quickly. Dr. Parker stood in the doorway of the waiting room, her surgical cap still covering. Is my mother alive? And could not read her expression. She is in recovery, and that frightened her more than once. She made it through the surgery. Your mother is going to be all right. Is she alive? Yes. The single word left Annie's knees unsteady. The operation went planned and your mother is in recovery. Closer. We are still waiting on some results, so we need to remain careful. Your mother is in recovery now. Did she wake up? She will be closely and we'll arrange a visit once recovery clears it. We discuss the full treatment plan. This is not the end of the road. But she woke up. She is beginning to. He can see her when the recovery nurse clears it. Annie covered her face. Is the man the one who helped us? Is he still here? My mother could see. She is stable now. Now she could not stop. He waited for a while. I can let him know. Dr. Parker, I'm sorry. He left early this morning. When Annie could speak, she asked, but he wanted you to have this. Mr. Whitmore still here? No, he left. He wanted you to have this. I didn't get to tell him. You already tried. Thank you, doctor. Annie looked toward the surgical doors. I wanted him to know she made it through. Dr. Parker studied her, then reached into the pocket of her white coat and handed Annie a sealed envelope. He asked me to give this to you after surgery if your mother reached recovery. Annie recognized the handwriting from the card. She opened the envelope carefully. Is there an address where I can reach him? Doctor, I just want to thank him. The foundation knows how to find him. Child and the doctor. He meant what he wrote in the letter. Do not spend it searching for me. Sit beside her when she wakes. Let her see a familiar face before she sees another bill or another chart. That will be thanks enough. Okay, Thomas. She's in recovery and doing well. Read it twice. Come with me. You didn't leave an address. She asked. Dr. Parker shook her head. His foundation knows how to find him, but I think he meant what he wrote. Annie folded the letter and placed it inside Grace's Bible with the receipt. A recovery nurse came for her soon after. Grace was pale when Annie entered, her eyelids heavy. Are you taped to her hand? I'm right here. Her breathing slow. The blue blanket had been placed over her again, folded crookedly near her feet. Annie moved to the bed and straightened it without thinking. Grace's eyes opened a fraction. Bobby, I'm here. Her mother's mouth moved. We need stat labs for room 3. Knew you would be. Annie, hands around Grace's fingers. Does anyone have the results yet? The incision looks clean. Let the fluids continue running at 125. Yes, doctor. Vitals are stable. Earlier, the hospital had felt the incision looks good and the IV is running smoothly. We've adjusted the overnight pain medication to ensure she rests comfortably. Questions and adjust the plan for the night. Annie understood something she had never understood before. There were people inside that door who knew how to pull someone back. Grace drifted to sleep. Annie stayed beside her, one hand still holding hers, the other resting over the Bible that contained Thomas Whitmore's signature. I see myself in that coat one day before anyone asked what she no longer had. A promise born made a decision she did not yet know how to afford. One day she would wear a white coat. One day she would be the person a frightened daughter saw walking toward her with an answer. Grace's recovery began with small victories that would have looked ordinary to anyone who had not spent a night fearing she might never receive treatment at all. Are you okay? The first morning she kept down a few spoonfuls of broth. Just breathe. The next day she stood beside the bed with a nurse holding one and Annie holding the other. This hospital coffee smells worse than anything I ever washed from hotel towels. The hospital coffee smelled worse than anything she had ever washed out of a hotel towel. Annie laughed because Grace wanted her to laugh. She also learned how quickly relief could become another kind of fear. The surgery was successful in removing the tumor, but the pathology indicates that further treatment will be necessary. Additional treatment. The surgery went well, but we didn't get clear margin. This means we're facing a more intensive course of treatment starting next week. The immunotherapy infusions are set for Tuesdays and Fridays. Monitor the white blood cell count closely. Note the dosage change here on the 15th. Does that mean I will not understand well enough to remember later chemotherapy? Grace said when doctor. That means I lose my hair. The hair may thin considerably, but we will manage the nausea and help you manage the nausea and fatigue. We will also watch you closely. Being watched so intensely is worse than any medicine. Your daughter looking at you like that is worse than I'm just taking notes. I'm taking notes. Your plan, even a military campaign planner is still allowed to sleep. Dr. Parker smiled. That somebody is still allowed to sleep. Annie did not mention that she had been sleeping in a chair with her shoes on, afraid that closing her eyes too deeply might allow something to happen without her. The following afternoon. Good afternoon, Mrs. Al, we already told you we can't pay the deductible right now. The fund will cover the approved surgical balance and assist with oncology costs, and no new deposit is required today. May I write a thank you letter to the benefactor? Of course, that would be wonderful. Cover the approved. We can arrange that and assist with your mother's oncology treatment. You must ensure they receive this. It's important they know how grateful we are. I understand and I promise to deliver it. I just can't guarantee a personal response. Grace closed her eyes. Honey, could you please pass me the hospital writing pad? I'd like to write my thank you note letter. You certainly can. Mom, let me just write it out for you. Baby, it has to be in my own hand. What I asked, Mrs. Albert, it means more softened. I cannot promise he will respond personally, Mrs. Brooks. He supports many patients. Grace nodded once. Then he will receive a letter whether he answers. Could you pass me the receipt? From the Bible, sweetie. Of course, Mama. Time for Grace's next pill. Her mother requested. For real. I'm coming home, baby. Her fingers were still uns. We have another chance because of this paper. No, my gratitude should be in my own handwriting, even if it looks one day you will need to remember people can still choose decency. Annie did not read over her shoulder. When Grace finished, she folded the page and addressed the envelope to Thomas Whitmore through his foundation. Then she held out her hand. Give me the receipt. Annie took the payment receipt from the Bible and passed it to her. The lost ring is only a signature at the bottom. Compared with saving a person in danger to come home to you. The doctors did that. The doctors had a locked door until that man opened it. You shouldn't have had to make those choices by yourself. Keep this safe. Why me? Because one day you'll need reminding that people can still choose decency. Annie placed the receipt back inside the Bible beside Thomas's letter and the card he had written in the hallway. Grace was discharged 11 days after surgery. They left Street Catherine in a cab because their Buick was gone. Grace did not mention there are more good people in the world than bad. Only the bad ones are louder with Christmas lights still hanging in their windows. Everything comfortable right now. We need the blanket is perfect. My ring. Annie's silence answered. Grace inhaled slowly. You know, this infusion is starting to feel less like treatment and more like a spa day. If the spa served ice chips and regret stronger, we will get the ring back if it is still there. If it isn't, then it is just a ring. I did not raise you to worship things while people are in danger. I should have told you. You should have had an adult standing beside you so you did not need to make all those decisions alone. Grace reached across the seat and took Annie's hand. That is the part one I'm sorry for. At home, the apartment felt smaller than Annie remembered. Church women had cleaned the kitchen, filled the freezer with casseroles, and left a pot of chicken soup in the refrigerator with reheating instructions taped to the lid. Mrs. Collins from downstairs had placed a vase of grocery store carnations on the table and written, "Welcome home." About the registration, what are you thinking of reapplying? Read the notice. I want to do the lab program. I know I can get in next world. I know it won't be easy, Mom. The bad ones are just seeing you in the hospital. It just made me realize this is what I have to do. Confusion days. I was just sitting there by the hospital bed not understanding anything in a machine. Then the doctor walked in and said you were alive. Waves of nausea. He just helped us and I could only say thank you. I don't want to be that helpless again. Grace could not shower. You are capable and sick people deserve someone who listens. That is why you will be a doctor, not to repay a bill. She wrote that Grace treatment that her appetite but don't turn your whole life into a punishment disguised as repayment each time respond become whatever you become because you have something to give not because you are still the frightened girl at the hospital counter. Mr. Whitmore received many messages from assisted families. They wished Grace continued health. Annie saved every letter but none carried his fountain pen handwriting. One afternoon, when Grace was strong enough to sit on the fire escape in the sun with a cup of tea, she found Annie studying a community college brochure beside a stack of hospital paperwork. You missed your registration deadline, Grace said. I can work this year and reapply. For what? Annie traced a photograph of students in white laboratory coats. I want to be a doctor. Grace watched her, quietly. Since when? Since I sat beside your bed and realized I understood nothing. Since drive. Parker walked into a waiting room and told me you were alive since a man I didn't know helped us and all I could do was stand there and say thank you. Grace reached for Annie's hand. Listen to me. You may become a doctor because you are capable of it. You may become one because sick people deserve somebody who listens. But you do not spend your whole life trying to repay a bill. It wasn't a bill, I know. Grace's voice softened. That is why you cannot repay it by making your life a punishment. Annie looked down at the brochure. Grace squeezed her fingers. Become whatever you become because you have something to give, not because you think you are still that frightened girl at the counter. Annie nodded, though she was not ready to separate those reasons. That night, after Grace had gone to sleep, Annie opened the Bible and removed Thomas Whitmore's receipt. At the kitchen table, she placed it inside a clear plastic sleeve so the creases would not tear. Then she opened the college brochure again and circled the number for admissions. She had promised Thomas she would help him someday. She did not know where he was, whether he remembered her, or whether their lives would ever cross again. But she knew what her hands were going to learn to do. Grace kept her promise to get stronger slowly, and Annie learned that recovery had no clean ending. There were months when the apartment calendar seemed filled only with infusion appointments, blood tests, bus schedules, and instructions written in Dr. Parker's clear handwriting. There were mornings when Grace could eat scrambled eggs and fold laundry at the kitchen table and afternoons when the smell of toast sent her hurrying to the bathroom. Did you finish classes at a community college following fall lectures in the morning, worked at the market in the evening, and came home to check Grace's medications before opening her textbooks? Some nights she fell asleep over biology diagrams at the kitchen table and woke to find a blanket around her shoulders and a note from Grace beside her elbow. Future doctors still need sleep. The first time Grace returned to New Hope Missionary Baptist after treatment. She wore her red hat and a navy dress that hung looser than before. Annie helped her up the church step. Oh yes, she's finally home. Welcome, sister. Let out a cry that brought half the congregation. Child, don't you ever run off like that again. We missed you so much. I missed y'all too, Mrs. Collins. She hasn't rested since Christmas began singing. Her voice kept her eyes on the hymnal because she looked at her mother. Girl, you better get some more of this macaroni. You look too skinny. Oh, I'm all right. Filled with baked chicken. Don't you worry about her, baby. Get a little bit of everything. You know, I hate pictures when I'm eating. This lemon pound cake is just too good. We have to capture this lemon pound cake, and took 3 bites before leaning toward Annie. Take a picture. You hate pictures when you're eating. I want one from today. Annie borrowed Mrs. Collins' camera. In the photograph, Grace sat beneath fluorescent church lights with one hand on her Bible and a paper plate in front of her. She looked thinner, older, and alive. That evening, Annie placed the photograph behind Thomas Whitmore's receipt in the clear sleeve. Years passed by effort rather than miracle. How do we ask for a peppermint hair in you, sweetie? She found a part at the church daycare. I am so proud of you, baby. All your hard work paid off. This is just the beginning, Mom. Next stop Annie. Now presents Annie Brooks transferred to the University Bachelor of Art. On the day she received her bachelor's degree, Grace sat in the second row. That's my daughter. The wedding ring Annie had managed. I'm so proud of you. Shop 2 years earlier when Annie crossed. That's my baby right there before anyone else. We are so proud of you, Annie. Congratulations, Annie said afterward, embarrassed and laughing as Grace held her face between both hands. You can be embarrassed after I finish being proud. Medical school cost more than anyone. Now you make sure you eat a good meal, baby. She learned how to live inside scholarships. Call me when you get in. Programs, loans, and long hours. I worry about you up there. Are you at least eating something properly? Mom, I'm fine. Yes, I ate. Stop worrying. I'll stop worrying when you're a doctor with a full belly. Yes, ma'am. All right. The doctor will be right with you. Are you comfortable? Sound hungry during your dear. Thank you. You sound hungry because you think coffee is a food group. During her hospital training, Annie first thought she would work in cancer care because of Grace. Then cardiology pulled her in. A failing heart told its story. Your father isn't just tired. I think there's something else going on. Flow in silence. A patient. We need to run more tests immediately. Confused or ready to be. I want to be the doctor who notices before a family is told there is nothing left. I know you will be the doctor who noticed before a family was told. Annie's heart has been bossing her around since birth. Explain it fully. You chose hearts, she said one Thanksgiving while stirring colored. Look at the vegetation on the mitral valve. This patient won't stabilize until we address the structural issue. Make sure to track the pressures hourly. Completed res. I got the attending position. Mom, I'm officially drive. Brooks. Oh, Annie, I knew you could do it. Baby, I got the attending cardiologist position. I'm officially drive. Brooks looked at Annie's face. Annie, baby, I'm so proud of you. Dr. Annie Brooks, attending cardiologist. Grace leaned against the door frame and covered her mouth. Benefactor could see this. Then she drew Annie into her arms and held her longer than usual. I wish Mr. Whitmore could see this, Annie whispered. Grace pulled back. Maybe someday he will. Annie had continued writing to the Whitmore Care Fund over the years. She sent a letter after college graduation, after medical school, and after her fellowship. Each time a courteous office response arrived, thanking her for sharing her family's news. Thomas never wrote personally again. But he should have done more. Grace photographs appeared in newspaper. He gave without attaching a string, or we can't resent him for his hair turned silver. His face grew thinner. Annie wondered whether he ever saw her letters or whether they rested in a file among hundreds of other stories made possible by his mother. Good. Grace never allowed her to become bitter about it. He gave without attaching a string, she said. Do not be hurt that he did not pull on one later. Grace lived 17 years after the night at the payment counter. Her final illness came quietly, not from returning cancer, but from a stroke that left her body unable to recover. Annie sat beside her hospital bed, older now, trained enough to understand every monitor and still powerless to bargain with time. On her last clear afternoon, Grace opened her eyes and found Annie holding her hand. White coat looked good on you, she murmured. Annie smiled through tears. You've told me that before. I intend to keep telling you until I can't. A day later, Grace was gone. After the funeral, Annie sorted through her mother's apartment slowly. In the Bible, she found Thomas's receipt, his old handwritten note, and a new folded page written in Grace's familiar cursive. You do not owe Mr. Whitmore a life. You owe this world the use of your hands when someone needs them. Annie sat on the edge of Grace's bed and held the note against her chest until evening turned the room dark. 5 years later, Drive. Annie Brooks was leaving her office at Lakeshore University Hospital. Dr. Brooks, this is Evelyn Parker. Number was unfamiliar. I wouldn't call unless it was urgent. Annie, doctor said, I need to speak about the old benefactor. Annie stopped with her coat half. We have a past debt of kindness breath. He is at Street Catherine. The old benefactor is at St. Catherine and may be sent home to die unless someone takes another. For several seconds, Annie could hear only the low hum of the ventilation. Evie in her office and the traffic far below her window. Thomas Whitmore's name had always belonged to another part of her life. Preserved in a plastic sleeve with her mother's handwriting. Hearing it spoken as the name of a dying patient made the years between them collapse too quickly. What happened? She asked. Dr. Parker's voice was quieter than Annie remembered. We'll navigate this path with the same care and precision we used for your mother's treatment plan. The reports confirm Thomas's decline. We are seeing sustained heart failure, persistent fever, and increasing episodes of confusion. The prosthetic valve treatment has unfortunately failed and the weakness is growing. Your nephew is arranging hospice at home. Who is Thomas's attending cardiologist? Dr. Samuel Reed. Annie. Reed. This is not a case of nobody caring, but difficult cases can become difficult before they become settled stories. Annie lowered herself into her desk chair. Her memory that debt was settled a long time ago, child and inside it. Hold on to the memory's note receipt. She had placed them there after her mother's funeral and never taken them out. Why call me because your specialty is complicated? Because I heard enough about his I called because you specialize in complicated valve disease. Because when I saw him yesterday, he asked whether the foundation had continued helping patients after he Thomas had asked whether the foundation still helped patients after he became ill. Not all, but enough to know he is being spoken. He is still himself. Annie, that sentence struck harder than aware enough to know people are speaking around him instead of to him. Answered every question before the patient could open his mouth. Wives whose pain became background because a husband said she always complained, or patients whose confusion was blamed on irresponsibility before anyone considered infection or medication. Illness weakened the body first. Sometimes the people in the room took illness weakens the body first, and sometimes the people in the room take the rest. I cannot simply walk into Thomas's case because of my personal connection. I am not asking you to walk. I am not asking for a miracle. Only whether you are willing to review a man before everyone agrees no meaningful road is left. Meaningful road left. Annie rose and moved to the window. Had begun falling over. Chicago disappearing into the streetlights below. 22 years earlier she had stood in a hospital lobby and begged Thomas to see one more possibility for Grace out. Dr. Parker was asking the same thing. I'll come, she said tonight. Annie reached for her coat. I'm leaving now. The drive to Street Catherine took longer than it should have. Snow slowed traffic along the expressway, and every red light gave Annie another chance to question what she was doing. She did not know Thomas beyond a single night and several pieces of paper. He had paid for her mother's surgery, then allowed their lives to separate. Perhaps gratitude had kept him larger in her memory than any man could remain in real life. Perhaps she would arrive only to confirm that his doctors were right and there was nothing left to offer except comfort. At the next stoplight, she reached into her bag and touched the edge of Grace's folded note. You owe this world the use of your hands when someone needs them. When Street Catherine came into view, Annie almost missed the entrance. The hospital. Good evening. Welcome to the hospital. I'll take the car right here. Replaced the old brick lobby. A covered drop-off lane curved past valet signs and heated benches. Inside, touchscreen kiosks stood where plastic chairs and peons had once been. Still, the smell was the same. Disinfectant, coffee, winter coats drying beneath fluorescent lights. Annie entered through the main doors and stopped near the center of the lobby. To her right was the corridor where the payment counter had once stood. It had been renovated into a financial navigation office with frosted glass panels and upholstered chairs. No one standing there would know that a girl once held two. Is that really in a grocery bag, and tried not to collapse until a stranger signed her mother into It's so wonderful to see you again. She turned. Dr. Evelyn Parker walked toward her with a cane in one hand and a wool coat buttoned high around her neck. Her hair, once dark and closely styled, was now silver. Annie had imagined this meeting over the years, but she had never pictured herself reaching for the older woman. The mother would have told every neighbor in Chicago one arm. Look at you, she said. Where is the patient? Grace would have worn out everything. The patient is in cardiac step-down room 714. Smiled, but it lasted only a moment. Let's go. Where is he? Cardiac step-down room 714. They walked toward the elevators. That care should never belong to the entrance to a newly expanded clinical. Did the elderly benefactor keep funding the pavilion? Care should never belong to the until illness made meetings impossible. Kept funding it? Annie asked. My nephew is handling all my affairs. Meetings. Is he officially your health heir? Dr. Parker pressed the elevator button. His nephew. The real difficulty is deciding when the patient lacks capacity. And when people simply prefer not to his healthcare proxy. When Thomas lacks capacity. Yes. Good morning, Drive, Evans. Hello, dear. Simply prefer to hear what he has to say. The elevator arrived. Inside, a nurse carrying takeout coffee greeted Drive Parker by name. Annie remembered her mother saying, older physicians never really retired. They simply collected more. Before we go into the room, there's something critical we need to discuss about your father's condition. The patient is no longer the man she remembers from the lobby. That he is thin and frightened, though he tries not to show it. Some days he knows exactly what is happening. Other days, conversations slip away from him, and immediate recognition should not be expected. I'm truly not looking for recognition. Though he tries not to show, but I suppose I hope the past days he knows exactly what is happening. Other days he loses. Part of you is still the girl who wanted the benefactor to know her mother. I'm not coming for recognition. Be gentle with that part, Drive Parker said. But a part of you is still the girl who wanted him to know her mother lived. Be gentle with that part. When you walk in, Annie looked down at her hands. Those hands had placed central lines, held pressure on bleeding wounds, guided families through decisions no one should have to make. Yet at that moment, they felt as uncertain as they had when she stood beside Grace's bed. Room 714 was near the end of the hall. Through the glass panel beside the door, Annie saw an elderly man propped against pillows. Oxygen tubing beneath his nose. His silver hair had thinned. His cheeks were hollow. A blue hospital blanket lay crookedly across his legs. A nurse adjusted the patient, insisting on signing his own papers whenever able. Table beside him rested a pair of glasses, a leather wallet, and a black fountain pen. Annie stopped breathing for a moment. "That pen," she said. "Doctor." Parker followed her gaze. "I'm not ready. He insists on signing his own papers whenever he is able." Annie opened her medical bag and removed the old payment receipt. Thomas's younger signature lay at the bottom, dark ink. "Is he still unarousable, doctor?" Parker placed vital signs, remained steady. "Are you ready?" Looked through the glass at the once, refused to let a balance, "do as I promised your son I would be," she said, slipping the receipt into her coat pocket, but opened the door anyway. The nurse looked up as they entered. Thomas did not stir. Annie walked to the side of his bed and she trusted her voice. 22 years ago, you saved my mother's life. My name is Annie. We never forgot." His eyelids moved. "I remember you." He turned toward her slowly. "You were the girl looking at her through fog." Annie took out the receipt and placed it beside the fountain pen. 22 years ago, she said, you paid for my mother's surgery." Thomas stared at the paper for a long time. Then his eyes, "I am the girl from that night." "The girl," he whispered. "The girl with the bag. I told you I would come back." "Hand." "Yes, sir," she said. "I came back." Thomas's fingers moved beneath Annie's hand, weak but deliberate, as if he needed proof that she was not another fever dream. "Grace." His eyes returned to the receipt lying beside the fountain pen. "Grace," he said after a moment. "Your mother's name was Grace." Annie felt the pressure behind her eyes. Her mother's name was, her voice steady. "Yes, Grace Brooks. She made it through. She lived." Thomas closed his eyes. His breathing lived 17 more years. His breath measured by the soft hiss of oxygen, but something eased in his face. 17 years, a number of years. She saw me finish college. She saw me graduate from medical. Grace lived long enough to see her finish college, graduate medical school, and become a cardiologist. Annie smiled. "A very stubborn one." "I'm a very stubborn," laugh escaped her, then dissolved into a cough. The nurse at the bedside, whose badge read Maya Lewis, RN, stepped closer. "Just catch your breath before you try to impress your visitor, Mr. Whitmore," Maya said. "You can impress your visitor after you catch your breath." Thomas settled back against the pillow. Annie noticed the effort it cost him to speak, the sweat near his temple, the fever tint along his cheeks. She had entered the room carrying an old promise. Now the physician in her was beginning to count what the daughter in her wanted not to see. A monitor displayed a heart rhythm uneven enough to demand attention. His ankles were swollen beneath the blanket. There was a grayness around his mouth that suggested his heart was struggling to do the work his body required. When he shifted, Annie heard a slight wetness in his breathing. Thomas watched her, observing. "You're studying me rather closely, doctor," he murmured. "Try not to look so worried. Doctors use when they wish they were only visiting." Annie glanced at Maya. "Annie has the look doctors get when they wish they were only visiting." "Very ill. I have become extremely popular with people carrying drive." Parker said you had been very ill. Gave him a small smile. "Well, at least I'm becoming popular with people carrying clipboards." He turned his head slightly. "The doctors think I should go home. They think I should go home." Annie sat down in the chair bed. "What do you think?" Thomas's eyes moved toward the window and the lights parking garage glowed through falling. "Tired is not the same as finished," he said. "I also think tired is not the same thing as finished." Maya's expression did not change. "I need to know exactly what happened before he gets here." Thomas was weak. He had moments of confusion. But I did not know Thomas had company. He understood exactly what was being said around him. Before Annie could ask anything further, the door. "I am the consulting cardiologist from Lakeshore University Hospital contacted by Dr. Parker." Carried an expensive leather portfolio and paused when he saw I once paid for her mother's surgery. "Uncle Thomas, I didn't know you had company." Thomas's mouth tightened slightly. "Preston, this is Dr. Annie, we mustn't forget your family's valuable contributions to the foundation over the years. Physicians here. It's comforting to have you here." Annie said. "My mother was assisted by cardiologist at Lakeshore University Hospital. I came because a doctor informed me contacted me." Preston looked from her to the old receipt on the table. "Thomas spoke before. I think Thomas has had an exhausting day. I paid for her mother's surgery a long time ago." The warmth, We are arranging a comfortable transition. Leaving politeness behind. I have not agreed to all the foundation families. Annie heard the phrase for what it was. Doctors explained more interventions may prolong category below the people in the room. Many things when I was asleep, she said. Is all this really necessary right now because drive? Parker informed me of his condition. Documenting what my patient says is always necessary. Moved to the foot of the bed. Do you want me to leave Thomas's water cup? Checking. Need to know what kind of cardiologist you became. Exhausting day. We're arranging a transition. Those are just old stories. Be comfortable. Thomas opened his eyes. I specialize in difficult valve disease and heart infection. Agreed to all of it. Preston's jaw tight. You have no position to revisit weeks of medical decisions. I have no role unless Thomas requests one and approve your discomfort. They explained many things. While I was still on the unit chart tablet and quietly entered a note, Preston noticed, is that necessary? Why is doctor? What my patient says is always necessary. I want to ask a question without having it answered for me. Would you like me to leave? No. His answer came quickly enough to cost him another breath. I would like to know what kind of cardiologist you became. Did your mother keep the receipt? Now is not the time for old stories. It stayed in her Bible before I kept it after the blanket. She answered him directly. I specialize in valve disease and infections. Mother had a good life after surgery held hers for a moment. The room was quiet under the results from the latest. My uncle's medical team has been managing his care for weeks. Why did you want to speak with me? Understand that arriving tonight does not place you in a position. I'd like Dr. Brooks to review my case. I understand that I have no role unless Mr. You should be discharged immediately. We discussed this enough. I appreciate your concern, but I'm staying put till a cardiologist clears me and your specialty doctor. Complex valve disease and cardiac infections, particularly prosthetic valves like Mr. Whitmore's. I can ask a question. Discussion is becoming emotional rather than medical speak for itself near the chair, uncertain whether we can arrange for Annie to review the record as a consulting physician easier. However, I must warn you that the review may not change the options missed it the first time. Yes, I understand. I am requesting the review myself. Please note my consent. She kept it in her Bible. After she died, I kept it. Wait until tomorrow. Moved over his signature. Tomorrow is what people offer when they want an old man to stop asking questions tonight. Not an easy one every day, but a good. I will arrange access to the records and meet you in the consultation room. That matters. The door opened again and Dr. Samuel Reed entered with Maya behind him. He had gray hair, tired eyes. Did your mother teach you that gesture? A position accustomed to families wanting answers medicine could not always provide. Her mother believed a straight blanket made a sick person feel less helpless. Look back at drive. Reed. I would like Dr. Brooks to review my case. Preston immediately said, that is not appropriate. Dr. Reed raised a hand. Let him speak. Thomas, I hope you understand that we have not stopped. I understand she is not on my team. She's a cardiologist. Thomas' opinion and your review may find nothing miss. Dr. Reed studied Annie. Your specialty. Complex valvular disease and cardiac infections. Something in his expression sharpened. You are aware Mr. Whitmore valve. At least Thomas will know he was given the truth before anyone sends him home to die. This is becoming emotional. Are the latest labs uploaded yet? Hold on, Annie. The system is incredibly slow tonight. Is to let the medicine speak for itself. An old aortic valve replacement, months of fatigue, fever, breathlessness, swelling, and repeated admissions. The dental abscess was treated months ago before the fevering. That's a long incubation period, but possible stared at regarding the transesophageal echocardiogram. The images were limited by prosthetic shadowing and a small leak could not be fully explained. Thomas settled deeper into his pillow, drained by the effort, but his voice remained clear. No, Preston, tomorrow is what people offer when they want. Look at these markers. In isolation, they seem unrelated. But if you overlay the timelines, the spikes match the episode. They're the same pattern. That would explain the anomaly. The key issues are the prosthetic valve and the culture-negative fever. We're seeing worsening heart failure, likely a new leak, especially with the confusion during fevers. Based on these findings, we're looking at prosthetic valve endocarditis with an abscess forming right here around the valve. She believed straight blanket endocarditis would feel less helpless. Considered as not excluded, especially when antibiotics may have hidden clean culture results without speaking. Sending Thomas home without naming the possible abscess would remove his chance to know what is killing him. The consultation area, I hope you understand. Now, about Thomas, have you noticed a pattern in his confusion? Usually starts around 3 or 4 a.m. Thomas is not always confused. Fevers make it worse. On clear mornings, he still jokes sharply about foundation board members and hospital oatmeal. Have you noticed any unusual pain or skin changes? Now that you mention it, then I'll know. The consultation room was narrow and windowless with 2 computer stations, a wall-mounted monitor, and a coffee pot that looked as the data on the left monitor is what concerns me. We need to analyze the trends before the morning rounds. Then stepped aside so Annie could take the chair nearest the screen. I'll give you the short version first. He said Mr. Whitmore had an aortic valve replacement 8 years ago. Until this year, I finished the login. The latest results for Mr. Whitmore are here. Thank you, Samuel. I want to look specifically at the medication history first. As you can see here, the markers are elevated. This confirms the diagnosis we suspected. We need to move quickly but deliberately. Fevers return. Thomas Whitmore had an aortic valve replacement 8 years earlier and remained stable until this year. The progression of symptoms over the past 4 months: fatigue, intermittent fever, worsening, shortness of breath, and fluid retention. Thomas has been admitted 3 times in 6 weeks with inconsistent cultures and antibiotics that only helped briefly before the fevers return. Shadowing were there any recent procedures that might explain the recurrent fever? Dr. Reed folded his arms. Small paravalve valvular leak. Thomas had a dental abscess treated about 5 months earlier with extraction and antibiotics. Annie opened the report and read it twice. Then she moved backward through the admissions, building the history in order rather than accepting the summaries written after Thomas had already been. When was the last transesophageal echocardiogram done? It was performed 3 weeks ago, but it was limited by prosthetic shadowing, making the images difficult to interpret. This report mentions an unauthorized data leak on page 3. Can you clarify the context around this specific entry, Samuel? The finding was a small paralveolar leak and that at the time they could not determine whether it was new or clinically significant. He had been treated for heart failure. The note described him as anxious about weakness but otherwise appropriate. On his 3rd admission, the first admission noted exhaustion, night sweats, and a low fever. Negative cultures led to antibiotics and discharge cognitive decline. But it wasn't enough. Look at this pattern. Reduced function, swollen legs, and now the valve leak began giving way to distress. Annie pressed her thumb against her lower lip. What are you seeing? Dr. Reed asked. I'm seeing symptoms that may have been separated when they belong together. The tests aren't showing us what we hoped, Annie. She reached for a mark. We need to consider transitioning to comfort measures of the room. Prosthetic valve writing each frame. I see symptoms which may have been separated when they belong together. Fever that may be culture negative. The initial suspicion was correct. We are looking at an acute myocardial infection here specifically involving the left ventricle. One can prove was old episodes of confusion that appear worse when he's febrile. Dr. Reed watched her. Annie drew a line beneath the findings. We have a culture-negative fever caused by prior antibiotics, worsening heart failure, and an unexplained valve leak. We need to connect these diagnoses in real time. The condition may be prosthetic valve endocarditis with an abscess forming around the valve. I know, but considered as not excluded. Infection-damaging tissue around the artificial valve would explain both the leak and the rapid worsening of heart failure. After antibiotics, endocarditis beyond the limited echo considered as not excluded. By the time his condition worsened, his cultures never identified an organism or every procedure. Antibiotics can erase clean evidence before blood is drawn that concern is valid. Was advanced imaging done beyond the limited echo not recently? Kidney function was poor and every procedure carried risk. The chance of naming it sending the patient home would not spare him from disease if an abscess, but so did attention. You think we moved too? Avoiding diagnosis only removes the chance of naming the disease. Before that decision becomes irreversible. The door opened and Maya stepped in with a "Did we move too quickly toward hospice? I heard there were 2 doctors. The patient deserves a fresh ass before the decision becomes irreversible. Beside drive. We need to monitor the BMP closely overnight. Thought you 2 could use a refill. It's terrible. Perfect timing. Thanks. Accepted it. Can I ask you a few about Mr. Much appreciated. Maya pulled the table. Go ahead. Is he confused all the time? No. Tell me more about the patient's confusion. What have you observed at the bedside? We can tell you which board members are particularly disoriented during the evening. Hospital oatmeal should be confusion is not constant. Evenings are worse. Fevers intensify it, and some mornings the patient is sharp enough to criticize foundation spending in hospital oatmeal. I'd like to ask specifically about any unusual pain you've experienced. Well, there were the bruised fingertips. We just dismissed it as arthritis or poor circulation at the time. One of the residents thought it was arthritis or poor circulation. Annie looked at Drive. Reed. He had already turned back to the "Were there any documented skin changes documented?" She asked. Yes, the nursing notes mention a small red spot on one finger. I entered it in my nursing notes. The red spot found the meaningful minor fever, the prosthetic valve. An older man with multiple illnesses. Alongside the fever, the prosthetic valve. If you're right, we're looking at more than antibiotics. Another piece of the possibly surgery. Doctor. Reed slowly sat down. The surgery is necessary, but it is dangerous. He would need more than antibiotics. We cannot let fear deny the patient the question. Yes, I explicitly told you I wanted to be present for any discussion of the prognosis. What is this board? Sir, we should not be denied. We are following standard procedure. What exactly is happening here? I demand to know. The cardiologist is simply reviewing your uncle's record as he requested. I expected a courtesy review, not rebuilding a treatment plan my uncle no longer needs. The current medical evidence suggests this is necessary. The patient requires additional evaluation based on these findings. Oh, so about the medicine no longer needs prosthetic valve, recurrent fever, worsening heart failure, possible new leak, and neurological changes. Based on what the man is simply confused personal attachment to a man who uncontrolled infections can cause those symptoms prosthetic valve recurrent fever. Are you seriously entertaining this? Possible new leak in neurological. Further imaging may clarify something not fully captured. Years old and gravely ill old people get weak. We simply cannot let him suffer anymore. Doctor people with uncontrolled it's time to consider his quality of life. Preston looked at Drive. Reed, are you serious? Don't pretend this is about medicine. You're here because of some misplaced sense of gratitude. Trying to repay an old debt with a sentimental story by a condition we may not have fully can become cruelty forced on a dying man. Maya standing near the door kept her eyes on Preston. Annie noticed the sentence had not included what Thomas wanted. Preston stepped nearer to the glass board and glanced over the words Annie had written. You arrived. I want to be clear. I am not forcing treatment. I am asking for enough information so you can decide for yourself. Way to repay him. But can she really make this decision clearly right now when it is forced on? Her lucidity is precisely why we must respect her wishes in this moment of it, because the fear was already inside her. Imaging an infectious disease will be consulted in the morning with risks. Discuss her during a lucid interval. She had asked, considering this he wasn't thinking clearly. Mr. Harrison patient was fully oriented when he signed this directive. We are legally bound to follow his wish anyone to force treatment on him. She said, I am asking that he receive enough information to decide for himself. Preston's mouth tightened. When he the nephew visits every day, but never asks whether his uncle is frightened. Dr. Reed moved everyone to stay with what can be documented. I'll consult imaging an infectious disease in the morning. We will discuss the risks with Mr. Whitmore during a lucid interval. Preston turned toward him. I object. Noted. Dr. Reed said, but Mr. Whitmore requested Drive Bruce's room and was very anticipated to state his wishes. Preston looked at Annie for another second, then walked out. The room grew quiet after the door closed. Maya crossed her arms. He visits every day and never once asks whether his uncle is frightened. Dr. Reed picked up his coffee but did not drink it. Let's stay with what we can document. Annie appreciated the reminder. Anger could sharpen suspicion proof. She returned to the board and added one final. We have a clearer picture now. There is a specific reason for your symptoms, which means we can run more targeted tests. He was sleeping. Is that good? The blanket had slipped away from one ankle. It is honest. Pulled it gently into place. Careful not to wake him, his eyes opened anyway. Did you find anything? He asked, his voice dry. Annie stood beside the bed. I found a reason to ask for more tests. Thomas breathed in slowly. Is that good news? It is honest news. He considered that, then gave up. Tomorrow they start. Honest will do, he said. I've had enough people trying to make the ending easier to explain. Annie looked at the old receipt lying beside his fountain pen. Then tomorrow they start with the truth. We start with the truth. By 8 the next morning, the snow had stopped, leaving the windows along the cardiac floor washed in pale winter light. Annie had gone home only long enough to shower and change clothes. How are we feeling today, Mr. B? He had a good night. Drive. A. Sitting higher in stable adjusted the tray in front of him. The oatmeal remained untouched. Good morning. I told her it was an insult to breakfast. How are you feeling today, Mr. Jones? When Annie entered a little weak, but much better cup of water. They call this breakfast. Violated your constitutional rights. I think it's still in a coma. My language may have been dramatic. It looks cozy. At least he smiled, then studied him. Here's your water, drama king. His face was tired. Try not to expel it dramatically this time. Had been during the night. Dr. Reed came in behind a tablet in his hand. His gaze is clearer. Still exhausted. I'd like to. The monitor shows his levels stabilizing in your records. Let's look at the tablet. Thomas glanced at Annie. She found something worth. Now that we're all here, I want to discuss something important the cardiologist noticed in your records. We've uncovered a specific pattern in the data, sir, that suggests your artificial heart valve may be central to the ongoing issues involving the valve. The pattern shows recurrent fevers, worsening heart failure, and a possible leak around the valve. May require a combination of strong antibiotics and surgery. What does that mean? If the infection is truly there, anyone talks about treatment, we need better images. The condition may require strong antibiotics and even surgery. But before we start treatment, we need to get better images and run specific tests. Will the test be painful? We would sedate. I'm a little concerned. We understand and we will make sure you are as comfortable as possible. This next test may be uncomfortable, but we will sedate you. The imaging itself carries risks because you are already so sick. Without further imaging, we may never know whether there is a treatable cause for your decline. I believe there is a real. You truly believe this is worth doing? I do. I also believe you have the right to know the answer before anyone asks. I believe there is a real medical question that deserves an answer. Seconds. You have the right to know the truth before anyone sends you home to prepare for death, said quietly. My wife, we had no money when she first got sick. She hated hospitals, delayed appointments because they had no money when she first became sick. By the time we had answers, the fear of the bills delayed her appointment. Annie felt her throat tighten. By the time we had answers, those answers couldn't buy much time. Because I could never go back. My mother once said that was why you helped people. He looked down at his hand. I helped because I could never go back and help my wife. Does that sound selfish? Said, your reason does not sound. The door opened before Thomas could respond. Preston walked in carrying coffee and a folded newspaper. What is this meeting? When he saw Annie and Dr. Reed at the bedside, this is a conversation about my heart. What is this meeting? Thomas answered before either physician could speak. You were exhausted last night. About my heart. The doctor agrees you need to focus on getting comfortable. Uncle, not making more big decisions right now. Exhausted last night. I was told to focus on comfort. Focus on comfort. This decision was pushed onto me. It was not freely chosen. You said you did not want heroic measures. I don't want to be kept alive when there is no path forward. But I also refuse to let anyone close that path before I can see it. Preston's gaze. Forgive me, doctor, but your enthusiasm for dangerous testing suggests less concern for the patient and more for your own professional interest. Suddenly, you're being led toward leading the patient, explaining that the physician is presenting medical options and the patient is deciding for himself. He is clearly intermittently confused and I've seen it all morning. Respectfully, Mr. Smith has been alert and oriented during my rounds. The patient correctly identified himself, the hospital, the date, his diagnosis, and the purpose of the conversation. Are you determining Preston's? I am documenting my patient's condition. Now, I am documenting my patient's condition. In your own words, can you explain what the team is concerned about regarding your heart? As I understand it, the main concern is the blockage and the need for the stent. The doctors suspect an infection involving my replacement valve, possibly causing the leak and worsening my heart failure. What do you understand about the tests we discussed? I understand they may reveal whether the suspected infection is true, while also acknowledging they are not without risk. If severe infection is found, I may need surgery and may die whether I choose surgery or not. Infection. Do you want to proceed with the diagnostic evaluation? May die whether I choose surgery or not. Dr. Reed nodded. I've made my choice. Proceed with further diagnostic evaluation. Thomas extended one hand toward the bedside. Are you sure about this? Please just think about what you are doing. Him the black fountain pen. Preston stepped closer. Uncle Thomas thinking is precisely what he is doing. Thomas looked up at him. That is precisely what I am doing. His hand trembled while signing, but the letters remained readable. Annie watched the pen cross the paper, remembering the same dark ink beneath her mother's name. Preston left before the ink had dried. The first test was arranged for late morning. Annie waited outside the procedure area while drive. Reed remained with the imaging team. She could not decide whether standing still was worse than pacing, so she alternated between both. Maya passed once and placed a paper cup of coffee near Annie without nearly an hour. We need to look at this. Doctor. Reed appeared in the doorway. This area around the artificial valve is showing clear signs of endocarditis. Confirmed an enlarged image. We need to start treatment immediately. The leak is larger than previously appreciated. And this suspicious region concerns an abscess around the valve. And this region here is concerning for an abscess around the valve. Annie moved closer following the damaged line of tissue, the irregular pocket where infection had been hiding behind. It appears to be prosthetic valve endocarditis. Prosthetic valve endocarditis and the complications are clearly destructive complications. Doctor. Reed replied, you were right. There was no triumph in it. Only the heavy knowledge that they had found the answer because Thomas was even closer to danger than they. Can the patient survive the surgery? Survive surgery? I honestly don't know. Doctor. Reed, antibiotics might slow the disease, but it won't cure it. Antibiotics may slow this down and not much more. In Thomas's room together. There you are. He was resting. How are you feeling after the procedure? Opened his eyes when he touched the bedroom. Yes, we found an infection around the valve. We're going to start you on antibiotics immediately around your valve. The infection has damaged nearby tissue and that this damage is why the patient's heart has been getting weaker. The news then gave a small tire. I'm not simply old and I'm not simply old and inconvenient. You were very sick, but now we know why he looked. We need to begin targeted treatment immediately. I am consulting with cardiac surgery right now. Said and we consult cardiac. We have to be clear. The surgery carries significant risk. It's a complex procedure and your condition makes it particularly hazardous. The operation is dangerous. This is now a fight with a name. He closed his eyes. His voice was weak but certain. Then I want to fight the thing. Want to fight the thing that has rested her hand lightly over his outside the room. Preston stood at the end of the corridor. Listen, we need an immediate surgical consult for the patient in room 3. It's urgent. Get the team ready now. Hope entered Thomas Whitmore's hospital room and for the first time, Preston looked afraid of it. The antibiotics began before noon. A clear bag of medication hung beside Thomas's bed, dripping into the line in his arm while drive. Reed explained. The infection has likely been attacking your heart for weeks, perhaps even months. We need to begin aggressive treatment immediately. A cardiac surgeon will review the scans later this afternoon. Until then, we can only support the failing heart, fight the infection, show whether it could withstand. You certainly have a way with Heartless with his eyes closed. Bleak. Yes, but remarkably organized. He said, you have a talent for making terrible choices sound orderly. Doctor. Reed managed a brief smile. It is part of the job. Annie remained. The imaging confirms significant damage to the left ventricle. We need to discuss the options, but they are limited. Thomas had the truth. Thank you, doctor. The truth. Infection has damaged tissue around the artificial valve and replacing the valve and removing the infected area may be the only meaningful chance of recovery. Your heart is weak. Your kidneys are under strain. And the operation itself carries extremely high risk. She said replacing the valve and cleaning out the infected area may be your only chance of meaningful recovery. But your heart is weak. Your kidneys are antibiotics and comfort care. But medication alone is unlikely to save his life because the structural damage is already severe. He has heard enough, doctor. You shouldn't be put through an operation that he won't survive. We need to discuss the options. There's nothing more to discuss. My decision is final. I do not believe medication app. My remaining days are mine alone to decide. That is enough. He said he is hurt. I've told you I am only looking out for his best interest. Why won't you just listen to me? His head toward him. I do not recall a point. You're preying on his gratitude, aren't you? I'm trying to protect, giving him false hope just so he'll thank you. Preston's face flushed. No one offered false hope. Only a confirmed diagnosis and a possible treatment. Insisting the decision belongs to the patient while he can still make it. Her voice level. Please just give me a moment. I need time to understand everything, but I am considering the surgery. I am not refusing it. That decision belongs to him. Documenting the patient's explicit request for comfort measures only. We will ensure these wishes are honored. I need time to understand. I am recording only the sentences your uncle specifically asked not to lose. My charting reflects his exact words and wishes as required by policy. Be honest. Do they still serve that dreadful rubber chicken at the donor dinners? I'm afraid some traditions are secret. That's a keeper, Mr. Williams. You gave us all a good laugh. Glad I could help. My patient asks not to. Now, regarding the next steps for your recovery for an hour, doctor, you don't have to sit with me all night. Even I need my beauty sleep. Still served rubber chicken at donor. Watching people breathe normal for a cardiologist. Wise, he said people reveal their worst ideas over overcooked chicken. Did your mother ever resent needing help? Relieved to hear his humor return. He studied her face. You do not need to sit here all night. She hated being the reason I had to beg at the hospital counter. I saw them this morning. The humiliation of it never really leaves you. I am a cardiologist. Her mother later said doctors could not operate on a closed door and he was the one who opened it. Did your mother ever resent needing help? Her mother sounds wiser than most people he spent his life listening to. She hated that I had to ask you. She hated being the reason I stood at that. The murmur is slightly louder. He's crashing. Get the crash card in here. Small for long. Mr. Jones, can you hear me? Can you hear me? She said the doctors could not operate on or were losing him. Get the crash card. Opened it. Thomas, rapid response. I need 2 large bore IVs and a central line kit immediately. Get this airway secure. Breathing grew uneven before he could answer. We're losing him. Get that Leo drip wide open now. It's cutting through the increasing the dosage. Maya moved instantly, calling for assistance while Annie stepped back to give the treating team room. Mr. Whitmore, can you hear me? Maya asked. Thomas tried to answer, but only a broken breath came out. Doctor, we need you back in the unit now. The patient stabilized briefly, but his rhythm is deteriorating again. The infection is overwhelming the patient. Medication surgery must happen soon if there is any chance of survival. Annie stood near the door. He cannot consent right now. We are not authorizing this emergency operation. He will die tonight without it. It might kill him anyway. Was enough. He expressed interest in the surgery while he was lucid. Interest is not consent to a deadly emergency procedure. We need to consider the legal concerns. They must review documentation for specific directions about deterioration. The infection is overwhelming him. Doctor. Chen said the documents are enough to wait for. My uncle did not want this. We operate. It has to be. We are withdrawing intervention and moving to comfort care. No, he understood the diagnosis. We need to move forward with the surgery now. The record has to show emergency authorization. Doctor, we can't proceed without it. He said interest is not concerned to an emergency procedure that could kill him tonight. Doctor, we need to review the documentation and determine whether he gave direction. You can't access his records without my approval. Preston pulled a verbal consent from his portfolio. We need to check the labs now. I have his healthcare proxy and his prior wishes. He did not want prolonged invasive measures. I am instructing you to keep him comfortable. Annie stared through the glass. The patient asked me to document his wishes after the cardiologist left. Because he feared someone would later pretend he had changed his mind. My instructions are detailed in the accompanying document. Please ensure they are followed precisely. This pen confirms my intent. I understand I have an infection around my artificial heart valve and that surgery may be necessary even if I could die during it. I authorize you to operate if my condition worsens and I cannot speak provided you believe it offers a meaningful chance to survive. We understand the cardiologist did not pressure him and that she found what was killing him when he had nearly been sent home without knowing. What are you doing? She did not answer. Annie followed her to the station. Maya opened Thomas's chart, searched through nursing attachments, then we need to mobilize immediately. Get the team ready. Clear the path. We're heading to the O now. Hold on. You can't say it's out of your hands. He said he did not want anyone pretending. Injection will be simply because the patient rejoined them. Maya pressed play. Thomas appeared on the screen, pale but alert. Consent confirmed the med. I understand I have an infection around my artificial heart valve. His records are off. Rolling. I will become necessary. I die during it. If my condition worsens and I cannot stay myself authorize the physicians treating me to operate if they believe it gives me a meaningful chance to survive. Doctor. Anne did not pressure me. She found what was making me die when I had nearly been sent home without knowing. No one spoke when the recording ended. Preston's face had gone still. Doctor. Reed looked at Drive. I must not let the truth be wasted. She nodded immediately. Preston, you chose this chance. I object, and we are going to honor it. Your objection will be documented. So will his decision. Within minutes, the corridor filled with purposeful movement. Nurses prepared medications. Surgical consent documentation was verified. Thomas's bed was unlocked for transport. Annie approached as they wheeled him toward the elevator. His eyes fluttered open once. Annie, he murmured, I'm here. Did we find the truth? She took his hand carefully. Yes, sir. He swallowed, barely able to speak. Then don't let them waste it. Annie leaned closer. You chose this chance. We are going to honor it. His fingers loosened as the medication took hold. The elevator doors closed around the surgical team, leaving Annie in the corridor with Grace's old receipt in her pocket and Thomas's life moving beyond her reach. 22 years earlier, she had waited behind hospital doors for news of her mother. Now she sat beneath the same cold lights and understood that a promise could bring you back to someone, but it could not make the waiting hurt less. The surgical waiting room had been renovated since Annie sat there for Grace. But no renovation could make waiting humane. The chairs were softer now. There were charging stations beneath the tables and a coffee machine that accepted credit cards. On one wall, a television played a muted weather report showing snow over the lakefront. None of it gave Annie a place to put her fear. She sat with her medical bag at her feet and Thomas's old receipt folded inside her palm. The paper had been protected for years, yet she worried at the plastic sleeve with her thumb. The family of Mr. David Miller, please. A nurse passed through the room and called another family's name. Two women rose together, paging the family of Arm. It's time. Annie kept her eyes lowered. She knew too much about what could happen in an operating room to comfort herself with simple promises and too much about Thomas to pretend he was merely a case being handled somewhere beyond a set of locked doors. Annie looked up. There you are, stood near. I brought you something to eat. Her cane in one hand and a paper sack in the other. Snow, what are you doing here so late? Well, retirement means no one tells me where I may sit anymore. Standing. I was retired before you became a cardiologist. No one tells me where I may sit anymore. Doctor. Parker lowered herself into the chair beside her. I cannot eat. I did not ask. Turkey sandwich because Grace would haunt me if I let you wait through another surgery on an empty stomach. I can't eat. I didn't ask whether you wanted to. Thomas was awake when they took him down for surgery. If I let you wait through another surgery on an empty stomach at the mention of Grace, he was awake enough to ask whether they had found the truth when they took him down. Told him yes. She said barely but awake enough to ask whether we found the truth and you answer. What she did not say I said yes was that truth may not be enough. What I didn't say was that truth may not be enough. No honest doctor ever believes truth alone is enough. No honest doctor ever believes it is enough by itself. Annie gave a brief unstable when she was young. When I was young, she believed becoming a doctor would mean she would never feel helpless beside a hospital door again. Again, you chose the wrong profession. You chose the wrong profession for that. I will repay him someday. I said it like a child. I once told Thomas I would repay him someday. Balance itself. Promises do not perform surgery. I made that promise like a child. As though words alone could make the world balance itself. Do not perform surgery and do not replace antibiotics back into the room before. Look toward the double door. Sometimes do something smaller yet just as necessary. They bring the right person back into the room before the door closes. He had been prepared. He was given back his right without knowing what was killing him. Whatever happens tonight, that's all we can do. Right to choose. Before Annie could answer, the waiting room phone rang. The male surgeon is asking for you in the surgical consultation room. Dr. Brooks, drive. Reed is asking for you. The damage was more extensive than we thought. Danny was on her feet before. He suffered a massive coronary event during the procedure. Outside the operating, the elderly patient is alive, but the damage is more extensive than expected. Beneath his chin made his face the infection tracked farther around the valve ring. We've removed the infected prosthesis, but the nearby tissue is severely damaged. The operating team needs to know whether the damaged extension matches the area the cardiologist questioned earlier. It matches. We need to prepare for a bypass immediately. We're losing pressure. Dr. Bypass isn't holding. What do you see? They need to know the CT shows a distal occlusion. We need to stent immediately. Was the secondary extension mapped before surgery? Yes, but we need to verify the aortic arch involvement. The CT overlay showed an irregular tract behind the main abscess pocket. Not fully defined, but concerning enough to change the surgery. That density correlates precisely with the symptoms. We need to intervene immediately. Understood. Annie closer to the image. If the surgeons are seeing damage there, the infection may continue toward a second hidden pocket. The overlay there was an irregular replacing the valve without clearing the second pocket could leave the source behind. It wasn't fully the field matches, but I was concerned the infection had extended beyond the debridement must be extended. Dr. Reed brought up. We're looking at deeper involvement than anticipated there, Annie said, pointing. If what you are seeing is along the posterior annulus, the tissue damage may continue toward that second pocket. If it is not cleared, you could replace the valve. Requesting immediate blood products and pressure support. Vitals are crashing. Dr. Chen said that matches the surgical field. I'm extending the debridement. Annie pressed her lips together. This was not relief. Do not let the truth be wasted. Any of them had wanted to believe. Look, this is non-negotiable. I understand the situation, but the trust reorganization has to happen today regardless of his condition. Blood products and pressure. The elderly patient survives lucid enough to sign new orders. The medical pavilion conversion will be finished and the board will freeze everything. No one had time to answer. Yes, I know he was supposed to go home. Stood motionless, but the new results change everything. We need to contain this now. There were supposed to be no specialists, no surgery, and no last-minute change because a charity case decided to play near the surgical waiting desk speaking into his phone with his back partly turned. I don't care what patients if he survives lucid enough to sign new orders. I usually am with Pat, especially when they need someone to remember what was said around them. Maya coming from the ICU corridor slowed before he noticed her. I need to formally report what I just overheard down the corridor. It has to be documented immediately. No specialist, no surgery, no last-minute change of heart because over here look at this scan decided to play savior. Maya stopped completely. Pressed into the damaged area has been repaired and a new valve has been placed. You should be with patients, he said. Maya's face remained calm. The patient's pressure dropped twice but is holding at the moment and they are not out of danger. Ended the call and not another word. Maya went. The heart is functioning enough for intensive care if the patient remains stable through closure and time seems to stretch inside the waiting through the glass. But before she could ask what had happened, drive. Reed called her name. The operating room speaker carried drive. Chen's voice again. We have repaired the damage. The bypass was successful. New valve. We managed to stabilize him. Dropped twice, but the next 24 hours are critical. The operation was successful. Annie gripped the edge of the he survived the procedure and is stable for now. Enough to move him to intensive care if he remains stable through. They removed the infected valve, cleared the abscess as thoroughly as possible, and replaced the valve. Her shoulders sagged beneath her surgical. The patient's body took a beating, and we're waiting near the doors. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical. We removed the infected valve. You did well, my dear. Cleared the abscesses 30 and replaced the valve. His body took I was so scared. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical. Annie nodded because speaking would have broken her apart. Doctor. Parker reached her from behind just as her knees weakened. He made it through this part. Annie turned into the older woman's arms, covering her face with one hand. He made it through, she whispered. Yes, drive, Parker said, holding her tightly. He made it through this part. Annie drew back, wiped her face, and looked toward the ICU doors where Thomas would soon be taken. 22 years earlier, his signature had carried Grace into an operating room. Tonight, the life Grace had been given had helped guide him out of one. Thomas did not wake that night. Annie knew this was expected. She had explained the same thing to families after major heart surgery. The machines, the sedation, the tubes, the swollen hands, the hours when survival looked nothing like recovery. Still, when she first saw him in intensive care, every professional explanation she had ever given felt thin. He lay beneath a warming blanket with a breathing tube in his mouth, several lines running from his body to pumps beside the bed. His face had lost the feverish. His blood pressure is still requiring significant support. We're seeing some kidney involvement, so I've adjusted the antibiotics accordingly. We'll monitor closely. The next 12 hours are critical. We've done everything we can, Doctor. Annie stood outside the glass until drive. Reed joined her. His blood pressure is holding with medication. You know, they do actually let us go home sometimes. His kidney function is concerning. Infectious disease. Antibiotics based on the operative findings. The next day will tell us more. Annie nodded. My mother would have liked you. Acceptable. On the first postoperative study. That was good news. The numbers are steady for now. News. It did not stop her from looking through the glass and remembering Thomas upright in bed. The patient's younger relative in the waiting area is demanding to see the attending. Dr. Reed, he's becoming quite insistent. You do not have to stay here all night. He said the expansion plans hinge on the patient's passing. He explicitly stated that her survival would complicate his ambitions. A tired smile cross. Nurse, confirm that you documented everything through the proper channels. All protocols were followed and logged in the system immediately. Then sit here herself. Maya came out of Thomas's room after checking the pumps. His numbers are steady for now. That is all I'm willing to. I said eat it. You need your strength. Enough, Annie said. Maya looked toward the window. Yes, Doctor. Mr. Preston Widmore has been asking when he can speak to the attending physician. He does not know what I reported yet. Dr. Reed's expression changed. Reported. Rise and shine. We got another one heard outside the surgical area speaking about the pavilion conversion. His concern that Thomas might survive able to sign new orders and his remark about Annie being a chariot playing. Annie felt heat rise into her face but anger arrived behind fatigue. The new valve is holding steady and her fever finally broke overnight. You document through the charge hospital compliance. Mr. Harrison has the durable power of attorney. We demand access to the medical records immediately. He glanced toward Thomas. We are the legal nest of kin here. Until the patient is stable enough to be protected from another fight. Annie understood Thomas had survived an operation. He should not wake to betrayal before he had enough strength to pleased with the outcome. Shortly before dawn, my priority is the patient's care. Mr. Harrison, half of the emotions. You manipulated her into this surgery because you knew she felt obligated to you. Her coat rolled beneath her head. That's disgusting. She did not remember falling asleep when she woke. He speaks of gratitude like a disease because he has never inspired it in anyone. Coffee. Maya said he will always be an outsider who entered his life through a hospital. Poor life choices. My mother lived 17 extra years because of this kind of care. Too critical. Is everything all right here? Those two words carried her through the morning. Perfectly fine now. They passed through cautious updates. Thomas's heart continued supporting. You're doing great. His fever began. Just breathe slowly with the machine. His kidneys did not. Are taking good care of you. But they did not collapse further. The intensive care physician said they might reduce sedation the following day if his breathing remained stable. Preston appeared twice. The first time he's off the vent who stood outside the exhausted but awake requested access to an already complaining about the taste in his mouth. The second time he asked to see his uncle and was all right. Can I see him? 5 minutes. Annie watched him start beside the bed. He did not take Thomas's hand. He looked at the machines, at the chart screen, at the tube keeping him alive, as though measuring what the night had cost him. When he stepped out, found Annie near the nurse's station. "You must be pleased. We're very pleased with your progress." Annie set down the chart she had been reading. "Well, doctor, this afterlife looks surprisingly like Street Jude's. He made it through, Mr. Jones. The surgery was a success. The infected valve was removed and the area cleaned. Gaze. We replaced the valve, but you are still very sick. Gratitude is the and the recovery will be long. Perhaps because you have never doctors always ruin good news with details. Hardened. You do not know this family. No, I know your uncle asked for a chance to live and you tried to answer for him." Preston lowered his voice. "When this ends, you will still be an outsider who entered. Your mother used to straighten blankets the same way." Annie glanced through the glass at Thomas. "She did. That bill gave my mother 17 years. She said, you may not understand that because nothing in your life someone choosing mercy." Preston took one step closer, then stopped emerged from Thomas. "This is my mother. Everything at her graduation, she asked perfectly. She made it because of walked away." On the second morning, Thomas's breathing improved enough for the team to begin waking him. Annie stayed outside while respiratory therapy worked with him. She knew the process could be rough. Confusion, discomfort, not entirely true, sir. Weakness too deep. When Maya finally came to the money paid the bill, the expression carried the first gave her time with her mother. "He is off the ventilator," she said. "He is exhausted," but he opened his eyes and asked why his mouth tasted like a toolbox. Annie laughed, one hand covering her lips. "May I see him?" 5 minutes. Do not make him give a speech. Thomas looked smaller without the breathing tube, but more like himself. Oxygen still rests and his eyes were heavy. "We did our best, sir." The blue blanket had his legs folded unevenly at the end. "We helped find the road to the bed, but the surgical team found really carried you through. They did incredible work," he whispered. "Mr. Whitmore, your answer sounds like this." When he spoke, "Did I survive or is this a very professional afterlife?" "You survived the surgery." He blinked slowly. "The infection. They removed the infected valve, cleaned out the damaged area, and replaced it. You are still very sick. You have a long recovery ahead of you." Thomas gave the smallest nod. "You doctors always ruin good news with details." Annie smiled, then reached down and straightened the blanket over his knees. His gaze followed her hand. "Grace did that," he said. "She did. 17 years. Annie felt her throat tighten. 17 years. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I am glad." Annie took a framed photograph from her bag. Grace stood beside her at medical school graduation, wearing the blue dress she had saved for months to buy, smiling as if the whole city should have stopped to admire her daughter. Annie placed it on the table where Thomas could see it. "She wanted you to know what your help became." Thomas looked at the photograph for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was weaker. "I paid a bill." "No, sir." Annie sat beside him. "Money paid the bill. What you gave me was time with my mother." His eyes filled and he turned his face slightly toward the window. Annie did not ask him to look back. She stayed beside him in silence until his breathing eased and sleep began to pull him away. Just before his eyes closed, he said, "Did you keep your promise?" Annie rested her hand beside his on the blanket. "I helped find the road," she said. "The surgical team carried you through. The pressures are holding steady here." A faint smile. "Good. That sounds like yes. Let's keep the dopamine stable and recheck in the hour." Seated a moment longer, Thomas was alive, but she knew the next truth waiting for him would hurt in a way no incision could explain. His heart had been repaired. Soon he would learn who had been willing to let it fail. Welcome to the recovery of care. Before the doctor moved to the cardiac recovery floor, he marked the change by comp. "Well, the good news is I survived. The bad news is they gave me this room. The view is absolutely dreadful. Skyline. You gained a bathroom door you can close by yourself once physical therapy approves it." "All right. Fine. Thank you. My gratitude." Annie stood near the window holding his updated lab results. His infection markers were falling. His kidneys were recovering slowly. He's still tired. After a few sentences and walking 10 steps with a therapist left him breathing as though he had climbed a hill. But each day returned a little more of him. You look like you just saw my credit score, Doc. Is it that bad? It's not your credit score, Mr. Jones. We need to discuss these results. The results from the cath lab show significant blockage. We need to consider surgery very soon. Mr. Witt, how long do I have to escape before? Your recent tests show that the damage to your heart is more significant than we initially thought. Results on his. We need to discuss the next steps. There are matters concerning Preston. There are matters concerning your nephew that you need to know. React at once. He adjusted the blue blanket over his lap with one thin hand as if preparing himself to receive a cold draft. He opposed the surgery. He said, yes, I knew that much. I know he opposed the risk. He didn't want me to go through with it. Speaking during your operation, he voiced his concerns. Enough to sign new orders. Your nephew did more than just oppose the surgery. Mr. Jones. Thomas stared at her. A nurse overheard him on the phone during the operation. The nephew stated that if the patient survived lucid enough to sign new orders, a major institutional plan would be stopped, making the threat disturbingly practical. What conversion? There are also questions about why outside consultation was. We need to discuss the next steps for your treatment. Quiet except for the faint clicking of the preliminary plans involve reducing charitable services and repurposing the medical pavilion for private specialty treatment. Attorneys and the Foundation Board are reviewing documents. Questions exist about why outside consultation was delayed, widening the betrayal. My broken laugh, a charitable distinction. I'm sorry for what? You did not raise him. He closed his eyes. He was just waiting for 16. I paid. I understand this is difficult. But you were recovering well. When he made mistakes, his nephew was making plans that depended on him not recovering. You gave him trust. What he did with it belongs to him. Thomas opened his eyes. He didn't raise my nephew. I have spent years telling rooms full of D. I put my trust in the wrong place. I meant patients who could not afford vulnerability. I never considered all my wealth means nothing. Nephew standing beside my bed and he's just waiting for the efficient conclusion. Annie reached toward his hand then waited until he turned his palm upward. Justice can mean giving someone his voice back. Is not always loud. She said, you know, the way you speak, it reminds me of my mother. Over gets his own voice back. Thomas looked at her wisdom. That sounds like I require an immediate meeting with my attorney and the Foundation Board chair. I am fully aware and intend to respond formally. And the chair Foundation Board. I'm ready to sign the documents. That Thomas was alert, understood the purpose of the meeting, and could make decisions for himself. Now that we are all present, let us discuss the terms of my autonomy. When the visitors arrived, Thomas, we have the papers ready for review. Wearing a gray cardigan Annie had brought from his house at his request. He looked frail but not absent. Preston arrived last. Uncle, you really should be resting. When he saw the attorney and the folder on Thomas, sit down immediately. Uncle Thomas, he said, you should be resting. I assure you, Uncle, this is all just a terrible misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. You called diverting the endowment a misunderstanding. Understanding. I assure you, the restructuring models were purely preliminary. My sole focus was protecting the Foundation's assets and ensuring long-term viability. You were protecting the institution by dismantling the very reason it existed, exposing the moral emptiness of the plan. The world has changed and funds cannot keep going to patients who will never pay them back. Funds into patients who will never be able to pay them back. Thomas went still. I once paid for your tuition photograph in your first position without asking for repayment. I never asked how the tuition I provided. That makes the betrayal worse. A position in my company. I thought helping a young man who had lost his family was its own reason. You show up after 22 years with some touching story and think you can influence his judgment. That is not what happened. Dropped. That is why it is worse. She came because I was dying. Preston. You found what others had missed and she protected the choice you tried to silence 22 years with a touching trying to spare suffering and suddenly you think you are trying to inherit a quieter problem. Thomas followed his gaze to Annie then turned back. The nephew's healthcare proxy designation is revoked immediately reclaiming legal control over his own body and care. The patient suspends the nephew from all Foundation authority pending independent investigation, blocking every sale, transfer, conversion, or restructuring under his signature. Quieter problem. Preston opened his mouth, but Thomas raised one hand. I am revoking your healthcare proxy designation effective immediately. You are suspended from all Foundation authority pending an independent investigation. No sale, transfer, conversion, or sting involving the Whitmore Medical Pavilion. The real mistake was made years ago. Margaret documents on the table. Thomas uncapped the fountain pen. His hand trembled more than it had in Annie's memory. But he signed each page deliberately. Preston watched the final signature dry. You were making a mistake, he said. Thomas replaced the cap on the pen. No, I made the mistake years ago. I am naming it. Preston left without saying goodbye. After feels only like a loss. Thomas leaned back drained. Do not mistake this for victory. Because losing faith in family can never feel like winning. Said losing faith in family is not victory. It is not victory. But keeping you from hurting more people is still justice. Thomas let go of her wrist and looked again at Grace. They must decide what becomes of the pavilion before anyone else mistakes kindness for weakness. By the time Thomas left Street Catherine, winter had begun loosening its grip on Chicago. The snow banks along the hospital driveway had collapsed into gray ridges. Just watch your step on the slush here, Mr. Whitmore. I know how to walk. Thank you very much. In one hand, and Annie beside him, moving carefully, annoyed by every did you assume I'd forgotten the mechanics of walking. I built equipment used, or perhaps you doubt my understanding of gravity. Approached with a wheelchair. Mr. Whitmore, you must take the antibiotics exactly as prescribed, regardless of how you feel. I told you I feel fine. Do I really need all of them? Tell me, Annie, is the nurse always this commanding? Only when necessary, Thomas. Only with patience. She is very good. He gave in and sat for the ride. The nurse is only commanding with the patient she wants to keep alive. You know, expected. A stone house set back from the road behind bare trees in a circular drive. Inside, everything was orderly without feeling lived in. Framed photographs of Thomas receiving awards. A single portrait of Eleanor near the fireplace, shelves of books, and a dining room table made for gatherings that had not occurred in years. Annie visited twice during his first month home, officially to review his follow-up plan, and unofficially because she knew recovery could feel lonelier after the hospital. The new medication seems to be helping with the pain. Based on your log here, Parker arrived carrying a covered casserole dish. Thomas looked at it suspiciously. I have a cook, doctor. Parker removed her gloves. Then your cook can have the night off and learn some humility. I brought my famous lasagna. Thought you could use a break from the hospital. Dr. Parker, you shouldn't have. This is wonderful, overlooking a lawn still brown from winter. The cook can have the night off and learn humility. But Annie noticed he finished everything on his plate. Gentlemen, behold, he said his napkins. Macaroni and cheese made by someone who truly understands audit. He said Annie rested her coffee cup in both hands. Are you sure that is part of your rehabilitation plan? No, which is why I did it without asking permission. I've gone over the foundation audit line by line. The patient I remember. There are some significant discrepancies we need to address immediately. Does reading audit papers count as rehabilitation? It does not, which is exactly why I did it without permission. Cancer navigation transportation. We've mapped out the support infrastructure, navigation, transportation, and advocates. This is truly systemic compassion. Preston did more than try to convert the pavilion. He narrowed assistance requirements so families were redirected, delayed, or denied help. Prepared to argue that the program, how many families were turned away? Annie's stomach tightened. How many people were turned away? We are still determining that. He looked toward the port stood behind the open door. My name on a building meant the door would my illness is no excuse. I should have been watching who was standing behind. Comfort is not an excuse I should admire in myself. Stop giving speeches and state your plan. Accountable. We propose creating a new fund right here in the pavilion. One that cannot be reduced whenever administrators prefer paying patients. We can use the deposits to fund the navigation team. And if we handle the transportation and child care, the advocates can focus entirely on the patients. The goal is to remove the financial barriers entirely. We provide the emergency support up front, ensuring treatment starts immediately. We need to list these out clearly. Transportation, then the chilled air issues, and of course medication access. It all comes back to having proper advocacy. This is more than a fund. It is an entire patient support program and an advocate who sits with them before financial fear. The program will need physicians, social workers, attorneys, financial counselors, and community partners. No, I cannot. Simply stretched too thin. We understand that we just need you to guide the medical mission, nothing more. Yes, she realized he was watching. He is not trying to buy her life. Only asking. Because she understands both the payment count and what happens after surgery. What name will you give the program? You have a career and patients of your own. I am not trying to buy your life. I know that. Do you? His voice softened. Annie, you understand what it is to sit at that counter. You also understand what happens after the operation. My mother would never want people making a fuss. She would object briefly, correct the brochure, then invite everyone to church for cake. Her mother was not a symbol of poverty, but a woman denied an easy road who still raised the doctor who saved his life. Thomas picked up his fountain pen and wrote one line across the top of the page. Then he turned it toward her. The Grace Book Second Chance Fund. Annie stared at her. The fund must have navigators who understand shame so no one has to tell their whole life in a lobby just to be believed, making a fuss over her. We must partner the fund with neighborhood churches and clinics, reaching people who don't already know how to access a large hospital. We should offer scholarships to students from these communities. A doctor who knows the cost of a bus transfer will ask different questions. So, we finally agreed and still raised the scholarship for the community. Her name belongs on a door that stays open. Annie covered her mouth. The chair is ready if you need it, Mr. Jones. Those steps are steep. I appreciate it, doctor, but I'll walk into the Lord's house on my own 2 feet. Illness had taken many things. Take a look at these. Do you recognize anyone? Is that Sister Clara? I haven't seen that picture in ages. That's my mother. She had the most beautiful alto voice in the choir. She loved singing here to be agreed. The mother knew every song and sang louder when she did not, to reach a large hospital. Thomas wrote it down. Thank you so much, Doctor. Parker added, we are eternally grateful for what you've done. A doctor who we finally meet, the gentleman who helped our beloved Grace. Thomas looked, the whole community thanks you. Yes, I was fortunate to be in the right place. Being in the right place to walk with only his cane is what matters. This new community health fund will allow us to offer preventative care and prescription assistance right here in the neighborhood. Grace would have cried over the fund name, then volunteered every Tuesday to help frightened people stay until someone listened. Picture. They will need volunteers on Tuesdays. Smiling beneath a blue hat, she sang alto. Annie said loudly when she knew the layout works perfectly. When she didn't, a voice behind them said that woman knew Amelie's are going to appreciate the space. Mrs. Collins, welcome. Please have a seat. I see you brought the referral forms. We can go over everything right here. Thank you. It's been a very long week trying to get this appointment. After a long embrace, she looked at Thomas. Annie said, Mrs. Collins, this is Thomas Whitmore. Recognition moved over the older woman's face. She took Thomas's hand between hers. You are the gentleman who helped our Grace. Thomas lowered his head. I was fortunate to be in the right place. Mrs. Collins gave him a look that allowed no modest escape. Being in the right place is easy. Stopping is what matters. We're here to help you navigate everything. Right this way. Simply held her hand a little longer. In the fellowship hall, I told you it would be easier this time. We can help you apply for the financial assistance program. It covers most of the treatment cost. Grace would have cried about having her name on it, she said. Then she would have volunteered every Tuesday and told frightened people not to leave until somebody listened. Thomas looked at Annie. Then we will need volunteers on your time. For the first time, this room is private and we're here to help with the paperwork. 1 year after Thomas's surgery, this grant is specifically designed to support families like yours so you can focus entirely on her care. Privately, meet advocates and apply for assistance without standing exposed in a crowded corridor. On the wall near the entrance, Thomas approved a small plaque and a photograph of himself. We have a private room ready for you and we'll make sure you get all the assistance alone while time is being measured against money. Welcome everyone. We're honored to have you join the St. Catherine family. Please once been the place where her world nearly closed. Thank you, Mr. B. This means everything to our Pat. It's exactly as I envisioned. 1 year after Thomas Whitmore's surgery, Street Catherine Medical Center no longer felt to Annie like the hospital that had once made her count crumpled bills beneath fluorescent lights. The same building stood against the Chicago cold, but the corridor near financial services had changed. There were private rooms for families to discuss assistance, a desk staffed by trained patient navigators and a small brass plaque beside the entrance. Please don't worry about the costs right now. While time is being measured, we have programs designed to help families exactly in your situation. In her purse, this brochure explains the process entirely. Thomas, just hand us the forms and we'll start the application now. She had planned to keep both with her during the ceremony, then changed her mind. Some things were meant to be carried, others were meant to be shown so people understood why a door existed. The auditorium filled steadily. Former patients from the Whitmore Care Fund sat beside children who were now adults. Nurses from the cardiac floor occupied 2 rows together, Maya among them in a dark blue dress instead of scrubs. Dr. Parker sat near the some hat Grace. Mrs. Collins had arrived with 4 women from New Hope Missionary Baptist and a lemon bee cake she insisted belonged at any important gathering. Near the stage stood a framed photograph of Grace in her blue dress on the "It's incredible to see how much everyone has grown. We wouldn't be here without the fun" against Annie's. The ceremony is about to begin and unashamed. When Thomas entered, the room rose without being asked. He walked with a wooden cane, slower than before his illness, but without the impact she has had on this institution, and the countless lives she has touched cannot be overstated. We thank you. Drive. Parker. Make way, everyone. The pound cake is here. Oh, Mrs. Collins, it looks absolutely divine. We were just talking about it. Quietly, thank you for raising her. Annie turned away long enough to regain herself. Dr. Samuel Reed opened the program. He spoke without unnecessary and to the families, especially the mothers who inspired them. We recognize your sacrifice which made this legacy possible. Barriers, child care needs, medication costs, and the confusion that often arrived with serious illness. Then his voice changed. A year ago, he said. Thomas Whitmore was a patient in this hospital. His case reminded many of us that medical skill is not only the ability to treat what is obvious. It is the discipline to question an ending that has become too convenient. He survived because drive. Annie Brooks saw a pattern. Nurses protected his experience. Thank you, Grace, for raising our Annie. Team extraordinary pressure. Welcome. It is my distinct honor to open this ceremony dedicated to the enduring memory of Grace. Her vision continues to inspire us all. The fund's purpose is to cover urgent treatment, transportation, child care, medication, and the confusion families face during illness. Exactly 1 year ago, Thomas's condition was critical. Was not loud at first. We weren't sure he would make it through the night. We must have the discipline to question an ending that has become too convenient. The lives of our patients depend on it. The speech honors the doctor who saw the pattern, the nurses who protected the patient's wishes, and the surgical team who acted under pressure. Are they allowed to decide about his own life? 22 years ago, a young woman approached me. Must not be overlooked because they are poor, old, frightened, hard to diagnose or unable to speak loudly. Borrowed what she could borrow. Thank you all very much. It is an honor to be here today and share my story from the row behind. I doubted her before I believe. Thank you all for coming tonight. It means a great deal to me and I know it would have meant the world to Grace to prove that her mother's I have been introduced many times as founder, chairman or donor. But those words no longer matter most to me. 22 years ago, right here in this hospital, I met a young woman. 17 more years. I wish I had known then what I know now. Annie, young woman carrying money in a grocery bag. Her mother needing surgery after every possible path had ended. I was wrong to question your honesty. Thomas removed his "I doubted you when you needed support the most." And for that, I am truly sorry because care should not depend on. You should never have needed to prove your mother's life matter. Should already be open. When he stepped down, Annie embraced him carefully. I paid the remaining deposited year and thought I had helped only one family through one terrible afterward. I believe that the mother lives in the old years. The auditorium larger from the stage, but she did not feel small in it. When his own life was moving quietly toward its end, the physician came back, looked again, and gave him the same chance. But over time, I understood there was another danger. People who cannot pay are often made to feel they must also prove they deserve care. The fund exists because care should not depend on a frightened family knowing the right person to ask it, and the door should already be open. After she died, I kept it because I thought it your mother should have made the speech. I was wrong. It represents a choice. I carried this receipt for 20 years. Again, today we finally talk about what it really cost. I truly believe that money was the only thing separating my mother from life. But we are transforming that pain into testimony. People who cannot pay are often made to feel they must prove they deserve care, patience, and respect. My mother kept this receipt, this proof of mercy, tucked inside her Bible for 40 years. It is a testament to her faith. Them was the name of the I once believed this receipt represented a debt for, but now I understand it represents a choice toward the elevators he chose to stop, look again after doubting, and not let her mother disappear behind a balance photograph was too large. I once promised repayment, but kindness is not repaid when two people merely decide they are even. Kindness is repaid when the next frightened and lonely person finds someone willing to stop. Wearing a winter jacket too light for the weather. Beside him sat an older woman in a wheelchair, her face pinched with pain. She's my grandmother, he told the navigator. I don't know what these forms mean. She raised me. I can't just take her home sick. Annie went still. Thomas followed her. Do you think your mother would approve? He said nothing. She walked toward the boy and stopped beside his. Really? What is your grandmother's name? Her mother would complain the photograph was too large and then ask where she could volunteer. Her hand. I'm Drive, Brooks. I don't understand these papers. She needs the treatment today, but they keep saying this isn't filled out right. As though he was not used to help arriving without a price attached. I just don't understand these sections, and she's in pain. Are we approved for the new medication or not? Let me take a look at those for you. We can figure this out together. Thought I helped one girl. She raised me. Doctor. Parker smiled. I cannot take her home. Just brought the help back with her. Outside, snow began to fall over Chicago. Inside, Annie opened the phone. Can you tell me your grandmother's full name? Began reading through it. Dorothy May, page at a time. The person it had found its next. We will make sure she is well cared for us. You don't have to worry. Wasted. Thomas did not help Annie's mother because he knew Annie would one day become a doctor or save his life. He helped. We'll figure this out together. All right. Mother deserved dignity and a chance. Look at her with him. She understands. Annie understood that is not merely paying back the person who helped us. We're in good hands now. It is carrying that compassion. I thought I helped someone else in need. You did realize she brought the help back with her. When one person chooses not to walk past another person's, this is where the pharmacy information goes. What if the first choice doesn't have it? Then they'll check with the secondary option listed right here. This section here outlines the assistance available. If you sign right here, we can finalize the support for your medical cost.